Another big piece was the relational piece because coaching is a relationship. It just is, right? And so whether it's one athlete you're coaching or an entire team, the relationships on that team are what create the culture, but what also can make or break the program.
Welcome to the Cheer Athlete Podcast, where we bring coaches, parents, and athletes expert tips and advice to help keep cheerleaders healthy, strong, and at the top of their game. Now let's go. Welcome to the Cheer Athlete. Today I have with me Coach Susan Averna, who is a developmental psychologist, has a PhD in developmental psychology, and is a mental health consultant and college professor at Trinity College. And she's also the head coach for the cheerleading team at Trinity College and is really growing the program there. I loved I've loved seeing the football pictures from this past season and the growth that has happened just in the last year. Susan and I talked last year, probably a little bit before this time frame, and had a really good conversation about what it takes to be a coach at a D3 program that's kind of a growing program. So go check that out also. And welcome, Susan. We're here today to talk about your book, Fabric, in which be the coach every athlete needs to be, or be the coach every athlete needs. And I'm really looking forward to this. I'm excited for you. And welcome back. Let's dive into your book. Tell us, how
Yeah.
to get into this and give us a background.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me. It's so great to talk to you, Laura. Yeah, so I've been thinking about this book for a long time. I would say probably 15 years. And that is because that's when I had taken a break from coaching and then I came back to coaching. And as part of our state requirements to be a coach in a public school system, we need to go through a significant training. And most of that training was around the physical aspects of coaching. So first aid and CPR and AED and all of those sort of preventative health considerations. And there was a little bit on the psychology of coaching, but there really wasn't much there. And that's kind of my bread and butter of what I had been doing for a long time with educators of all sorts, including coaches. And I thought, wouldn't it be great to have a resource like this for coaches? And so that was 15 years ago, but I was coaching, I was a professor, and I had a newborn and a toddler. So there was a pause there. Here we
Yeah.
are 15 years later. And I've learned so much more in those 15 years anyway. I'm really glad I didn't try to do it then. Um, but yeah, the title of the book is Fabric. And what I wanted to do was to take some diverse bodies of knowledge and integrate them. So looking at the research and the theory in developmental psychology, in health psychology, sports psychology, neuroscience, and a lot of contemplative practices because I've done my own work around that. I kind of wanted to integrate all that, but it's very much rooted in research, but I wanted it to be accessible to coaches so that what do we do with this? How can we apply it? So I kind of put it together and thought about it in terms of a framework. Like, what are the most important things a coach needs for an effective program? And to be able to really support the well-being of athletes as well as the development and performance of athletes. And luckily, they are the same things. We don't have to give up one for the other. And that's the great thing. And that's kind of what challenges some of the old school thinking around coaching is we don't need to be harsh and punishing to get the best out of our athletes. There's a way to, if you're understanding people's biology, there's a way to support both. And that's what it's about. So the framework it was kind of fortuitous that it came out to spell the word fabric. That wasn't intentional. But I'd always been doing a lot of work around awareness. So self-awareness and awareness of others, and in terms of mind and body. So throughout the book, there's a lot of exercises and reflections that the coach can use for him or herself, but also that the athletes could use to develop greater awareness. And again, that leads to both skill in the sport, but it also helps with that mental well-being. And we can get way more into that if you'd like. So I've been doing that for years. Another big piece was the relational piece because coaching is a relationship. It just is, right? And so whether it's one athlete you're coaching or an entire team, the relationships on that team are what create the culture, but what also can make or break the program. And a big piece of that, there's two big pieces to that in my mind. One is belonging, and one is something that I think is unique to my book, which I'm calling repair. I have not seen this in any coaching culture type leadership books, not explicitly addressing the idea that in relationships, there are inevitable breakdowns. That's just our humanity. So what are you going to do with that? What does that look like to repair? So all together, oh, and then another piece is um, managing our attention, right? Or what I'm calling focus. So being able to direct attention. So we are always paying attention to something. And as you know, there's a lot of people and organizations and businesses vying for our attention. So it's really a skill, a critical skill for our well-being to be able to know where it's going and direct it intentionally. So I'm calling that focus. So the fabric is focus, it's awareness, it's belonging, it's repair. And we're doing this all with intentionality because that's the I, because when we default to kind of what our biology would have us doing, it's a lot of times it's not that focused attention. It's not, we have to be intentional to kind of offset the default programming that our brains and bodies have. So I get a lot into the biology of that. And then lastly, the C is curiosity and compassion. I couldn't decide. And they're both related to each other because when we stay curious, whether it's about ourselves and our own reactivity or what's going on with another person, we tend to more easily stay out of judgment. They don't coincide. So we have to, again, intentionally try to stay curious, even though we may jump to conclusions, we may make assumptions, we may think we know what's going on. A lot of times we're wrong. And that's where those breakdowns happen in a coaching situation. So they're all interrelated. I couldn't tease them apart. It's not linear. It's not like there's a step system. They all influence each other and are influenced by each other. And as I put them together, I was like, this spells fabric. And that is the coolest thing ever because I sort of feel like these are all threads interwoven that strengthen each other, you know, the fabric of a team, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's the framework of the book. I wanted it to be more like a roadmap rather than it's not a curriculum, it's not prescriptive. Um, People bring their own personalities and ways of coaching to a team. They're all good. There's no right way to coach. But I wanted it to sort of distill down these principles of like, here's the things to keep in mind. Here's the way to think through problems. Like, it's not like here's the solution to your problem. It's how are we framing it? What are we trying to figure out here? And so it just sort of points people to the way to figure out what's going on with their team and to maximize the success of their team and the well-being of their team. And then I'll say one more thing, and then you can ask me any kinds of questions. You can go deeper on any of this, but I take you through those 6 aspects, and then I apply it in 4 different ways. The first one is coachability. And that's another thing that I feel is unique to my book that I have not seen yet in another book. Not the concept itself. People talk about coachability all the time. But when I hear coachability, I hear it as it's this static quality that kids bring or don't bring to the team. And that as coaches, we look for it. We look for these characteristics. Do they take good feedback? Are they self-motivated? All of these things, right? And my take on it, particularly for youth coaches, you know, that are developing athletes. I'm not talking about professional sports. I'm not even talking about necessarily D1 high pressure. Those coaches need to find athletes who are already coachable to bring in and add to their culture, not detract from their culture. But I'm talking about recreational coaches. I'm talking about club sports at the youth level. I feel like we have a moral obligation to behave in a way as coaches to create coachable kids. And that is probably one of the most challenging things as a coach. For me, it has been, is when you get a kid who comes onto a team and for one reason or another, do not have these qualities yet. They are so hard to coach. And it's tempting to either let them go, cut them, not give them your attention or whatever, or give up on them, lower your expectations. And it's such a missed opportunity when that happens, because I have seen kids flourish under the right conditions. So I go into this in quite a bit of detail about what it means to how we show up as a coach can create coachable kids, and vice versa. We can make kids less coachable, right? In some cases.
Right.
So that's the first way I apply it. And then the next chapter is on team culture. So I talk about what it means to have a strong team culture. And a lot of these aspects play into it, particularly the belongingness. And underlying that is really psychological safety. When kids and adults, but when when they feel like they can fail without fear of retribution, humiliation, blame, punishment, that is when we grow. That is when we take those risks that are necessary to grow, whether it's in the specific skill related to a sport, or if it's relationally and being able to own, a breakdown and repair it. So all of this, okay, then there's two more. I'll just tell you the other two. Then it's health and well-being. I apply this to these principles to, because I'm a developmental psychologist, I think a lot about what do kids need to develop optimally. And there's a lot of writing about this right now and trying to understand, is there an actual mental health crisis? And if there is, what is at the root of it? And it's certainly multifactorial and there's no simple solution to it. But one or a few reasons we're seeing this increase in anxiety in kids, increase in depression in kids, and other mental health issues is that some of the developmental needs that we have as people are not being met because they are experience dependent and we've lost those experiences. So, for instance, I don't want to blame it all on technology because I don't think it all comes down to smartphones. But, and then I'm not the first person to talk about this for sure. In fact, I drew on quite a bit of research around this. But when you think about how you learn to relate to another person, like I'm looking, even though we're virtual right now, I'm reading your face. I can see the expression in your face, your eyes, your smile, and I'm getting certain feedback from that. And when kids grow up with that, they learn much more on an intuitive level what I'm feeling in my body, what you're feeling in your body, how it's getting expressed, how you took what I said, and oh, maybe I have a chance now to say it differently because I can see that maybe you didn't get what I was saying, things like that. It happens very organically, moment to moment, face to face, synchronously. And one of the things that's gotten lost with the introduction of an iPhone is everything now is not, well, it's not face to face, unless I guess it could be FaceTiming, but if you're texting, it's not face to face and it's not synchronous. So we're expressing our emotions with emojis and things like
Right.
that, which that, of course, we know that can get misread anyway, but it's that sort of natural human interaction needs to be there to create the skills, the social skills, and they've lost that. The reason I say that for this book is because sports are a phenomenal opportunity to provide that back. We know that we've lost a lot of the free play for kids, and a lot of it's been replaced by organized sports. There's still some free play, but a lot of it's organized, and that's okay. But just think about kids who maybe don't have that in their neighborhood and they don't have it in any other way. So sports is a tremendous opportunity for that. And you can speak to this, Laura, the physical aspects, experience dependent and sort of creating proprioception balance. You need to move your bodies in all directions every day. And kids used to be able to do that, and they're just not getting the opportunity to roll down hills and climb on whatever, there's a lot that's been written about that from PTs and OTs as well. sport to some degree can create those opportunities. So to me, it's when we do this right, when it's done well, um, it really can enhance the wealth, no, sorry, not the wealth, the health and well-being of children and adolescents. And that's what's exciting for me is when I see a kid really just blossom in a way that they hadn't before because they hadn't had that opportunity. But again, it goes back to if we're going to learn these social skills and they're going to come in not having them very well, there's going to be some rough moments, right? And so what creates that safety net for that to happen, the breakdown, the repair, the learning, the getting better at it, is the coach-athlete relationship. And that means that the coach has to be very well regulated and not reactive. And it also is a team culture of belongingness, of knowing that these are my people. I'm going to mess up. It's not the end of the world. All will be forgiven. We'll figure it out. We'll problem solve together. It's going to be all right. And it's not, doesn't even have to be that explicit, but it has to be a feeling of like, it's okay for me to be myself here in all my messy humanity, and things will still be okay. So that's the sort of health and well-being chapter. And then the last chapter is an extension of that. I initially was going to just wrap it all in one, but it needed its own chapter. I've done a lot of work on trauma over the past, I don't know, 20, 25 years, well before everything was trauma informed. And I really think there are some, first understanding what that looks like, but mostly for coaches, understanding the biology and not letting that negatively affect expectations. So a lot of times when kids come in with a trauma history, whether you know it or not, they're going to come in with being kind of uncoachable a lot of times. They're going to have qualities that make them harder to coach. They might be more reactive. They might read negativity or hostility where there is none. There's lots of things, and there's good physiological reasons for that. So I do think the more we understand that as coaches, not take things so personally, and work with it, again, it's a great opportunity to give kids a different experience than they've had before and allow those skills to develop more organically within the team. And so I give a lot of tips and reflections and exercises around that, and to build in the resilience, to talk about mindset, how important it is not to lower expectations, and contaminate in that way, where think about it in terms of a redemption, that kind of thing. So that's the book. I wanted to make it very accessible. So in addition to giving all this information, illustrating it with examples and anecdotes, some from my own coaching, some from other people, um, lots of reflections and prompts for coaches to consider if and how they already do this, or do they want to introduce some of these aspects? Do they want to change something that they're doing? It's not prescriptive. It's just getting people thinking in the right way, like the most effective way. And then the last piece that I included that I really love is I interviewed a bunch of athletes, college athletes, but they reflected on their youth experience in athletics as well as their current college. And it was across a bunch of sports. It was not any one specific sport. And I wasn't looking for anything in particular. I really kept it open-ended. For the psychologists out there, it was a grounded theory approach. So it was really about going wherever they wanted to go and then looking for themes across transcripts, across interviews. And it was remarkable what came out of there. And it was really enlightening to me. Some of it wasn't surprising and other pieces were, and I was able to interweave that throughout the book. So there's a lot in there, but I'm really excited about it. And I hope, my whole point is that it's a useful resource for coaches, because I think that coaching is one of the most difficult roles to be in and one of the most rewarding, certainly has been for me.
Yeah.
And I want to give props to anyone who does it, but I also want to give support, because the well-being stuff also affects the coach positively too. And so that helps with reducing burnout and increasing longevity in coaching. And the best coaches, they're in it for a while. I mean, in fact, a lot of the athletes would talk about, they would contrast different coaches that they had from different programs. And invariably, when they got to their favorite coach, their best coach, their whatever, most nurturing, but still had high expectations kind of coach, it generally was an older, wiser person. Not that you can't do that when you're young.
Right.
You could be great when you're starting out. I wasn't. We talked
Yeah.
about this in a different podcast,
Yeah.
right? Some of the stepping in it when I was 23 versus, in my 30s, 40s, and now. So some people do have these tendencies and ways of being naturally. It's just who they are and they're amazing. But other people don't because they didn't have those relational experiences or they weren't coached in that way. They weren't mentored in that way. And they're kind of just replicating what they witnessed and experienced. These are all skills that can be learned and practiced to make you a better coach, for your own well-being, but also to increase the effectiveness of your coaching, the performance of your team, and the well-being. That's all I'll say right now.
I can't, I said this before and I can't wait to read it. And honestly, like you said, I wish there was this resource a long time ago when I was coaching.
Mm,
Because like, you said, you talked in the very beginning about, the state has regulations to be in a public school and, whether I was at high school or Holy Cross, like I had to have my CPR and I had to have my first aid and I had a concussion
concussion
test.
protocol, yeah. Yep.
But there wasn't any real coaching, and I assume it's the same for across the board on coaches, not just cheerleading, but like on how to be an effective coach. And again, my athletic director at Algonquin was amazing in like
Yeah,
teaching. And I didn't hear it at the time until I now look back and I'm like, oh, that's what he was talking about. Um,
right.
but I can relate to um, feeling like some kids were uncoachable and being like, oh, they just,
Mm-hmm.
give up on them and being so frustrated. And then going back later being like, they needed more guidance. They
Mm-hmm.
were right for coachability, like, and not necessarily on the physical end.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish I think I was lacking in the tools to help that. And I think when I look back, some of it I helped, but like some of it also I could have been much better at. Um,
Yeah.
and so I think this is gonna be a great asset. Um,
I also want to say, though, this isn't about you need to be a perfect coach to be able to do all these things for these kids, because this recognizes the humanity of the coach.
yeah,
We are human. We have bad days. I have bad days still today. I didn't have a great practice earlier this week. Had an awesome practice last night. But we have, I think, and I'm pretty sure of this, we have the type of culture that we can have a bad practice and be like, all right, we'll get it back next time. So it's really the repair part is as much, give yourself some grace, right? Because you're going to show up tired or stressed out from your life. You might do or say the wrong thing. You might be highly reactive one day. That's all okay. In fact, I go into detail about this on how the repair, not only the modeling of the repair, is fantastic for kids because it gives them this understanding that breakdowns and ruptures happen even in the best relationships. And this is how we repair. So we model it by doing it. But then there's something that happens even on a nervous system level. I get into this a lot. I go into the biology of everything I talked about. There is an underlying biological process that's happening. Um, and with repair, you think of it in terms of, you know, when there's a breakdown or when there's some sort of conflict, you're in that stress response. That's okay. Because when it's repaired, you come back to that homeostasis and you're literally on a nervous system level, your nervous system gets more flexible. And
mhm.
for kids who have not had that experience, and it doesn't even have to be kids with significant trauma, just kids who grew up in family systems where people didn't kind of acknowledge what went down. We just moved on from it. They don't necessarily get that flexibility. And so now they come into a place, a team or whatever, an organization where there's a there's a rupture, there's a breakdown, something happened, there's a misunderstanding, misattunement, whatever. It doesn't even have to be big. You see them freeze up or react really hard. And those are the kids that are harder to coach in the beginning. But as you kind of make things more explicit, acknowledge your role in it, show them that, yeah, we had a breakdown and here we are back together. We're understanding each other again. We're going to problem solve together. We're going to learn how to communicate with each other better. All of those things happen, changes mindset, changes thinking, of course, gives them skills, but it also is rewiring their nervous system in such a way that maybe after dozens of those things happen, they aren't as highly reactive. And then this is the best part to me, they take that onto in the world with them. So in their other relationships, they're different. They're showing up different. They're showing up differently at their jobs. You know this, Laura, when you coach, you are affecting them in the years that you're coaching them, but they are taking that with them, and good for good or bad, which is why it's a high pressure situation, because they are going to take the lessons that you gave them. And most of those lessons are implicit. They are not the words you're speaking. They're what you're doing. It's how you're showing up. It's what you're modeling. It's how you've reacted or responded. All of that feeds their thinking about themselves, about how they relate to others, and then it transfers out. So sports, athletic participation just has tremendous potential to heal and to support development. But to do that, the coaches are driving it. The coaches are driving those interactions. They're driving the vibe. They're driving the culture. Culture can sustain once it gets really strong. But we have to be intentional about creating the culture. So what are we about? What do we value? So a lot of the reflections in the book are thinking first about, well, what are your priorities? Like, what is it that you value? And then are your actions, policies, procedures, feedback aligned with that? Because sometimes they're not. And it's not intentional that they're not. Nobody's saying, ha ha ha, this is what I say I claim to value, but this is what I actually do. It's not like that, right? It's just, we have to really think about it. Like, I've run into some issues over the years, and if I've got, I initially get worked up, you have your reaction, whatever. But then when you come down and reflect, I think, okay, well, what is it that I'm really trying to accomplish here? Because that's going to guide where I go from here. What's the discussion that needs to be had? Do I need to be more explicit about what I was trying to convey? Do I need to apologize for my own activity? Whatever it is, what's the sort of main, the value that I'm trying to live out here? And that has guided my thinking when there's been difficult moments. It's like, what are we trying to do here? This year I have almost no time on the mat, and my team really wants to perform. We are going to a competition next week. And I'm not joking when I say we've had almost no time on the mat. And I was getting stressed out about it. And I thought, we're not going to do this. I can't do this. I only want to go if we can put on the best routine we could possibly put on. But then I came off of that and thought, no, that's not what we're about. They really want this. And I'm writing about this. I'm writing about giving opportunities to build confidence, and then I'm not going to take them. No, that's silly. We're going to go. So we're going to go, and we're going to do the best we can with the time that we've had. We're going to put on the best performance we can, and it'll be a fun, memorable experience nonetheless. So that's what I mean. It's just, there's no magic here. It's just sort of getting very clear on who you are, who you want to be, how you want to show up. Looks different for different coaches. There's no exact way to do this. Some coaches are very loud and animated, and some are more quiet and reserved, and it has nothing to do with that. It's more about the fit between you and your athletes. That's a tricky one, because you have all this variability in the individuals on your team, and as you get to know your athletes, you know that you can be one way with one, and maybe you might need to ratchet it back for another one, just because
people are who
the
they are.
joke or the whatever is going to be taken differently, or the feedback's going to be taken differently. you learn that as you go. You get to know your athletes really well. But, you know, it's a ongoing kind of moment to moment, practice to practice thing. There's no mission statement and that's it, or I don't know, pep talk and then you're done. It's living it out day to day. And the good news about that is when you mess it up, and you will, you got the next moment and the next practice and the next game to repair. Um, so for me, coaching has been really rewarding, really challenging over multiple teams and decades. At times challenging, of course, awesome too. And I've probably grown more from that than any other role. And I've had teaching roles and consulting and counseling and all of that. But having like 15, 20 people reflecting back who you are
Right.
will teach you
Yeah.
something about yourself.
Yeah.
I have a new athlete who joined just last week. Um, and I know the program she came from. And she said to me, wow, you are so different from my other coach. And I know her other coach, and she's a great person. I was like, yep, we are. We just have a different approach. I don't know that one is better than the other, but we just have a very different approach.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I think a lot of what you said connects into physical therapy and like injury recovery and injury
Hmm.
recovery, well, prevention too, but injury recovery. Because I find myself all the time in the clinic having, like, I have a couple clients right now that have had not traumatic injuries, but whether they're joint replacements or they're like maybe going for a surgery or they've come out of an ACL surgery and like, they come in like Tasmanian devil and like the world is going to end. And like, you have to like, the neurological system has to quiet. And I find myself a lot
Right.
like, give yourself some grace. Like it doesn't happen overnight. And it's a learning process. You're training your body, and you're creating different movement to allow things to let things come down. And it's a process. And I think both in coaching and in, whether it's rehab or you're exercising, like you're going to have good days when you're in the gym working out, and you're going to have bad days, and that's okay, as long as you recognize like, oh, this is a bad day and it's repeating and I'm now leading towards injury. Like, okay, let's do
Right.
something about it. But if you can, reflect back. And the older like, I've journaled for a long time, but here and there and whatever, but the more I get older, the more I look and say like, oh, this is a really good practice for me. Like, how did yesterday go? What do I want to do different tomorrow or today?
Yes.
And how can I make that better? And I think as a coach, that's really important. And in your injury recovery also, or, in just your general health, I think that's important to be like, because every day is a new day to start again. And,
Hmm.
take a breath and like keep moving forward. And I think, the other aspect of like building that relationship and, and being able to know that you can repair it and like build on the relationship, repair it when it needs to, and move on and keep growing. That's growth. And when we continue to grow, then, ultimately, I think we all want our athletes in our families and whoever, my patients, we want them to be happy,
Yeah.
and when you're moving and doing all that stuff and being able to do what you want. So in communication and connection, I think, is a big piece. I don't know. Well, your C was like, I like the two different C's that you had.
Yeah, well, so you were just making me think of that. We didn't talk much about the compassion piece. I love the parallels of what you're saying in sort of injury recovery. Because I parallel the skill development with the more of the mental and social skill development. Both things are happening at the same time, and by the same sort of processes, which is really the trial and error and honing of it. But it's not always linear. And so, yeah, it does take repetition, right? And like you were just saying, it's gonna take a lot of repetitions to get back, and you might start to go off course. That's where the self-awareness comes in, right? Is like, oh, okay, wait, I don't want to repeat something that's incorrect or going in the wrong direction. So we think of that in terms of skill development as a coach, right? We give the opportunities for the athlete to repeat and practice a skill. But if we see that they're doing it, whatever, in an incorrect way, they don't have the proper body form, whatever it is for your sport. I talk about the swing plane for the baseball player, but it's we want to correct that so that they're not making a sort of incorrect procedural memory there. And so it is parallel in that way. That's where, yeah, the breakdowns, but the compassion piece is so important, and the self-compassion piece. So I talk about compassion generally, but it's all of this is always for self and other. And so for the coach, knowing that you're going to have those bad moments and days, and you're not always going to show up as the perfect person. I mean, I'm really hard on myself generally. I probably take things too hard a lot of times, even though I practice this self-compassion quite often. But being able to bring some of that to yourself, to be like, okay, that wasn't my finest moment. And now what? Because the research around self-compassion is interesting, because people who don't know about it might think that, well, the more kind I am to myself, I'll just slack off. I won't try as hard, whatever. That's not true. People who are higher in self-compassion are more accountable. They hold themselves, they're less likely to procrastinate. That's interesting.
Yeah.
And they hold themselves to a higher level of accountability. And that is because, again, when you have that safety, when the threat is reduced, you can say, man, I messed up, right? So if you're not beating yourself up, you're acknowledging, that wasn't great. I reacted, I said some things, or whatever you did. Okay. And you might know why. Maybe it's because you were exhausted, or maybe something was triggering, or whatever. But the more compassion you can bring to that, then you can own it and you can repair it. It's the people who are really hard on themselves, that tend not to repair it, because it's too painful. It's too painful to even acknowledge. Let's just move on from that. So the compassion is equally important. The athlete needs to have it for themselves. The coach needs to have it for themselves. We try to give it to each other. We try to stay curious. One of the coolest things I've learned over the years is working with the body to change the mind. Because I feel like, especially in athletics, especially in heated moments, competitions, you're on the floor, it's in a game situation, whatever, you're not going to change your mindset. You're not going to reframe something in that moment. You could reflect on it later and you could work with that. But if you get sort of spun out because of something that just happened, stunt dropped, whatever it is, and now you're in your head, you're probably not going to recover with self-talk in that moment. And you could, I guess, if there's some rituals around that, but the rituals, I write about rituals in this book. The rituals are really linked back to the physiology. So when you're changing the physiology, so the way I talk about it is through the breath, right? Changing the way you're breathing, changing posture. There's a lot of research around how posture impacts mood and mind. And what's the other way? Well, I'm blanking right now. But the curiosity piece was, there's some research that shows that when you just take on the shape of a person who is curious, so whatever that means for you, Laura, if you were like, that's interesting, whatever it is, the gesture of curiosity keeps you more open-minded. And it also conveys to the other person that you're genuinely curious. You're not like, I know what's going on here. You haven't already concluded. You're sort of open to learning, open to knowing more. And so those two things go hand in hand, the compassion and the curiosity, I think.
Yeah. I'm not sure what I want to ask on that. But yes, I think we lose out a lot. We kind of, if especially we're on the go, we're like, I have to get to practice. I have to go and do this. You lose, you stop thinking about where you are. And
that's right.
And
whenever, so I think of it in terms of threat, and I mean psychological threat as much as any physical threat. A psychological threat is going to send you into fight or flight the way a physical threat will send you into fight or flight. And then, it's pretty common knowledge now that the brain the higher level thinking brain anyway, shuts down and you go into that more primitive reactive mode. So if you can bring compassion to yourself, or the other person, or ideally both, that just lowers the threat. And it lets the problem solving and the creativity flow. It allows for that curiosity of like, I wonder why she's doing that, rather than, oh no, you didn't look at me that way.
Right.
You
Right.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
And look, we're all human. We're all going to have those moments
Right.
where, something's happening and why is that happening? What are you talking about? And have that sort of defensive reactivity come
Correct.
up. So I'm not saying it's easy to do, but it can be practiced. And I just think about the times where you jump to a conclusion and you've gotten yourself all worked up over something. And then you get more information a few days later and you're like, oh, that's not what was happening there at all. Or maybe that's just me. But,
Right.
and then you think, wow, I suffered for
Right.
no reason because I jumped to a conclusion. I made an assumption. It was incorrect. And,
Yes.
if I had just been like, I don't know what's going on there. Yeah, I could ask, I could give them the benefit of the doubt. There's other ways around it. And even if it is your worst case scenario, so what? If
Right.
right, if the point
Yeah.
is like that could be something going on with them that has nothing to do with you, right? And so this all comes back to it's rooted in neuroscience, but it's really these more contemplative practices that have been around for thousands of years.
Right.
And just kind of taking everything we know about our humanity, about our default mode, what we tend to do. So I talk a little bit about the brain in that one of the reasons we do jump to conclusions, because I'm not trying to be harsh on anybody who does that, because we all do it, is that our brains are pretty magnificent in this way. Going back to the attention thing, we can't take in all the stimuli coming at us. We just physically cannot do that. So what we do is we look for patterns. We create categories. We start to create filters through which we take in the environment. But sometimes the filters are off, right? That we have experiences that have created the filters, and now we're not seeing things with fresh eyes because we have a filter and we don't even know we have the filter.
Right.
But it's this idea that it is natural for us to jump to conclusions. It is natural for us to try to create logic where there seems to be none. Let's create a story about what just went on that makes sense. And so much of this happens automatically and at an unconscious level that we're not aware that we're telling a story. We're telling a story that may or may not be true. And then we're suffering because of the story
Presence.
sometimes.
Right.
So the more we can just kind of take a breath and go, yeah, I don't know what's going on right now. I'm going to try to stay in a position of curiosity and openness, and I don't need to know everything as the coach. This just because you're the leader doesn't mean you have to have every answer all the time. That's a tough one. That's something I
Yeah.
work on all the time.
Yeah.
I really try to walk the talk, but I don't do it perfectly, and that's okay.
I think that's a big, like, I think when and my business coach reminded me, and I've heard it other places, but you don't have to know everything. As long as if you're the one in charge, as long as you're one step ahead and you can look
Mhm.
back and say, let's switch this, then you're doing the right thing. And when we are open to continuing to learn, then we can keep making that progress and we can keep adjusting as we go along and need to. I
Yeah,
wanted
so
to,
that one step ahead is the intentionality part, right? It's like
yeah,
you know what you're trying to accomplish. So take a breath, think about that. All right, we got off course. Where are we going to go now? That
yeah,
is the intentional part of it, right?
yeah. I wanted to ask because this ties into the beginning, and over the last, I don't know, 20 years ish, that cell phones have been part of
Mm.
our
Mhm.
lives and internet has been part of our lives. And like kids don't know any different now. Um, and
Yeah.
it is a massive distraction, and there is a lot of uh, um, stuff coming at us. Not distraction, yes, but like
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. The
coming at us.
fragmented attention is
Yeah.
crazy. Yeah. Yeah.
And we're not going back from that, right?
Right.
And people my age or even a little older, are we, back in our day when we, every generation has said that. And,
Yeah. Yeah.
do you I also see that there are people like us that are having these conversations more, or maybe it's what I'm tuning into more because it's what I'm
Hmm.
craving.
It's your
Um,
algorithm. I'm just kidding.
right.
But there is some truth to that, right? The more we
Yeah.
look for things, the more we
Yeah.
see it. I mean,
Yeah.
not just in terms of what these platforms are doing to us, but our brains do that. Our brains
Right.
are the original algorithm. You see
Yep.
what you're looking for, and that's what I meant when I said you have the filters on what you don't even know. But
Yep.
in this case, I think it's a good filter. So go on.
So I don't think we can go backwards, but how do we go
Mhm.
forward to, like one tip that I can give, and like and I'm trying to be better about it, but I go to bed with my cell phone at night because I listen to the podcast before I go to bed. Um, but then I'm trying not to pick it up for the first
Yeah.
hour in the morning.
Mhm.
And that's just one, like, but we can't ignore it. Like
Right.
I do all my communication through this and my computer now,
Yep.
so it's not going away, but how do we find a way to have that still human connection and keep moving forward in the digital age of life?
Yeah, and I don't mean to
That's here.
demonize the technology because I don't think that this generation, I know a lot of people bash on Gen Z and Gen Alpha or whatever. I'm not bashing on them at all. I think they're amazing kids. They have a different skill set. So when I said it, they're missing out on things that are experience dependent, they are. It's not the end of the world. We can recreate some of those experiences for them, and I think that's where sport has that opportunity. To your question about, what do we do with the technology? We do have to learn to work with it. Um, I will just tell you though that first of all, when we're at practice, like there's no phones, and it's not. I don't even have to say it. Like they go away for the 2 hours we're there, and I think that my athletes like that because it is a break. They get to get out of their heads for a little bit, which is whatever's going on in their life. It could be their academics, it could be some drama on their phone, but they get to put it down for a little while. Um, I think the more we can give back some experiences in that face to face. It doesn't even have to be in sport, but I just think that slowing things down, um, initially there might be some pushback because there is a withdrawal effect. I'm bored and
Yeah.
but the research around this shows that dissipates pretty quickly and everything kind of settles down. But it's not just not being on the phone. It's what are you missing when you are on the phone? So there's the aspect of like, let's put away the thing that's fragmenting your attention. That's one piece. And maybe it's not, we got to learn how to like you're saying, like you have given yourself time where you know you're going to be on it, time where you're trying not to be on it. And then the other time, I'm guessing you're managing it in some way. So those are going to be important skills. I'm still doing that for myself too. I had a rhythm going where my phone was down the hall plugged in. It's changed because I'm also listening to things off my phone to help me sleep and things.
Yeah.
But then that's very tempting when it's right there.
Yeah.
So, you know, I give this generation a lot of credit. I think that for me, whenever I've worked with middle school to adolescent, teens and young adults, they like to know about their brains and bodies. So I usually come at it just not in a fear-mongering way, but just like, hey, this is the brain. And this is what happens when you do this. That's why you're feeling the way you are right now. There's nothing wrong with you. You're not. I do think some of the amplification of the mental health crisis is that kids are been being told that these how they feel, there's something wrong with that. It's like, no, actually, this is a normal response to the environment you're in. It's not good, and maybe when we want to think about how we could change that, but there's nothing inherently wrong with you. And that's a message I try to get across to the kids that I work with. Um, but giving them those experiences, those face-to-face experiences. It's so, I mean, even at sometimes just breaking out of the drilling of the skills and things. So at practice, for instance, I mean, my favorite practices are like the free for all, like, all right, I'm going to give you 20 minutes. Here's what you got to do: choreograph a dance and put in a, whatever, put in a
Yeah.
jump, put in this, put in that, change lines. And they just go off and have so much fun because now they are really communicating with each other. They are giving their thoughts. They're being silly. They're having fun. and then they're performing it, and their teammates are cheering for them, and it's just, those are the best times, I feel
Yeah.
like, and that's some of the stuff that's getting missed. So when I think about it, it's like, okay, yes, there's the attachment, attention
Yeah.
fragmentation, thank you, and but there's also what is being lost during the time that you're on the phone, and it's like 5 hours a day for most people at this point. That's not even an exaggeration anymore, you know. And you think about, what do you get back? One of the things that came out of the interviews with the athletes is, when they talked about the positives, because they talked about the pros and cons of being a college athlete. It's a stressful, time
Yeah.
consuming thing. Um, but they just had this camaraderie that they felt they would not have had otherwise. Is this physical time together. They spent it in the sport, in practice and performance, but they also would eat together. They would volunteer together. They would play together in a non-sport
Yeah.
way, you know. And nowhere in there did I say we're texting each other all night. You know, they were together. And I think we can get that back. We've kind of, I feel like the pendulum swung as far as it's, how much further could it swing at this point? People are really
Right.
craving slowing down,
Yeah.
hands on. I mean, I used to run workshops for teen girls, and I would always try to incorporate something, you know, easy but creative, tactile. They could do it on their own, or they could do it in little groups, you know, whatever it was. Paper
Yeah.
mache, I don't know, whatever. Something that's just kind of like not the screen. And then there's all the other stuff. There's the social comparison and things that happen online. There's levels of this, and I get into it to some degree in the book. Um, but yeah, I don't think that there's anything wrong with this generation, and I think there's, maybe crisis is a strong word, but there's been a wake up. Like, okay,
Yeah.
something's got to
Right.
change here. But even the kids want to change. They do. I teach a course called The Science and Practice of Well-Being, and we talk a lot about habit formation and habit change. And almost all of them will opt to do something with reducing screen time. And I'm not telling them to do that. And
Yeah.
I'm not fear mongering. I do, you know, they know, they see it for themselves. And one of them would, you know, he decided he got a regular alarm clock, and then put his phone away at a decent time, and chose not to look at it. He started to sleep better. He was a football player, and so he's performing better. And but others might just, you know, they use some of the apps. They're tuned in.
Yeah.
You know, I think that we didn't really talk a lot about culture, but culture influences because it is the water you're swimming in, right?
Yeah.
So that's why we have to so intentionally create a culture, because it's not obvious sometimes what's getting conveyed, because it's happening on such a subtle moment to moment level. Well, right now, like you said, the current generation of kids, this is what they know. This is all they know.
Right.
But give them opportunities for something different. And while my daughter goes to a camp, overnight camp in the summer, there's no phones for like 2 weeks. She doesn't die. She likes it. You
Yeah.
know, they're just constantly moving and doing fun things together.
Yeah.
And I do think there's that initial shock of not having that instant connectivity, but there's also a recognition that the connectivity is not what we need for our hearts. It's
Right.
almost a disconnection. And we all know this. If you use any kind of social media, you know that. You spend enough time on it, you feel pretty bad about yourself at the end of
Right.
it.
Right.
So I don't think it's going to come from adults telling kids, do this, don't do that. But we do need to provide the alternate experiences so that they can go, oh, this does feel better. I want to do more of that.
Right.
Yeah.
Um, I'm gonna talk one more thing on this, and then I want to ask you a not book question.
Okay.
But so you know, you talked about the outside feedback and the I had an opportunity to work with a team with it's a part of a team last week, and because the parents wanted to learn some different positions, the parents are coaching their youth program, not an
Correct. Yeah. Okay. Nice.
and they just kind of wanted some more advice on that. And I went into it with my PT brain and this is, this is how you move. And these are little girls. And I
Yeah.
left, these are little girls, they need to play. And
Yeah.
one of and I just shared a post today from Jeremy Frisch, who's local here in Massachusetts, and he always promotes, kids need to roll and play and
Mhm.
climb and do this. And I think that's a big piece, and it's a criticism I have of our cheer culture. I'm sure it goes in other sports too.
Mhm.
But get these kids into our structured program at 3 years old, and they go until they're, we'll say 24 maybe,
Mhm.
and and that's all they do. And not
Yeah.
only from a physical standpoint, but from a physical like injury point. But you're not getting that same stimulus from like letting them get outside. And now I don't, there's a time for structured practice by all means, but I also think like when we are conditioning them and we are trying to build skills and we are trying to build this connection, like I love that you give your kids, okay, go take 20 minutes and do, it's still cheer related, but it's
Yeah.
more fun and experiential. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
Experiential.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that that's a big piece. And where I fault myself on this clinic is like, I think these kids needed a little bit more experiential, like, get on the floor and roll and like show me this, um, to be able to learn. And that's going to help them build their baseline so that then when they go to do a full up, they have
Right.
that internal sensation and awareness. Like body awareness is a huge piece, I think, of
Yes.
injury. And, and I think we lose that because we are all so structured and we don't challenge outside of this.
Yeah.
Um, and so,
Well, you know this, you teach this. I mean, it's really functional movement, right? And so I have made it a point to educate myself around that for my own well-being, but also for my athletes. I don't think that's the norm yet, but it's
right.
it's it's some coaches are understanding that more, and some are still doing real old school approaches. But yeah, I mean, I've never coached real little ones, other than when I was maybe a teenager. I coached rec, like little rec. Um, but the more, yeah, this is a great opportunity for you, and you recognize like, okay, maybe I could have done it differently, so you will next time.
Yeah.
But providing maybe games or fun types of skills where they are moving in the ways that they need to move, where they are becoming more aware of their body's position in space and that kind of thing. Um, it will translate to the skills when they're ready to get in a load or when they're ready
Yeah.
to, put up a stunt of some sort. So I try to keep that going too. And I'm always very explicit with my athletes. Now, you wouldn't necessarily do this with a 3, 4, 5-year-old because you got to talk to them at the level that they're at. But I'm talking about, adolescents and young adults here. And I will tell them exactly why we're doing what we're doing and what it's doing for their body and why we're not doing it this way. Because some of them are still fighting me on the old school way that their high school coach showed them. And I'm thinking, well, I don't, no shade on your high school coach, but we know better now. So this is what we're going to do instead. If I give them a good reason for it, then they're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's why my shoulder hurts. Yeah, that's why your shoulder hurts. So
Right.
let's try it this way
Right.
instead,
Right.
you know? Um, but that's even there's so many parallels here, but like you are in a sense in a coaching role in that, right? So you're just you saw like, okay, the information's good. How can I deliver it in a more accessible way for this group, given that these are parents who maybe don't have much training in this area and little ones who have a short attention span and want to keep moving and,
Right.
you know,
Right.
I
Yeah.
think
And
that's
I
so
think this,
great.
I think that the takeaway that ties into your book is that it's, be open to change, be recognize your audience, be
Yes.
compassionate and with them and with you, and
Hmm.
and create that culture as you're going that it's okay to mess up and it's okay to keep moving forward. And I think that's key. So
Yeah.
um
Cool.
I am very much looking forward to your book. And grab it, let us know when it comes out and we'll get that
I'm
posted on
thinking in about
too.
2 weeks. So I'm not sure when this will be posted, but shortly thereafter. Yeah.
Um, so and my pivot, because you did mention that you guys are going to compete, and I remember we talked last year. There's a lot of changes happening around this, in like your practice space and that.
Yes.
Um, how because that for me was very frustrating when I was like we'd be set with our practices and like ready to go, and then like, oh, it rained, and so you get kicked out and somebody else comes in. And this is obviously a bigger, longer time, but like, so
Uh,
how did you how did you manage it for yourself and being able to move forward, not in the physical space end, but
mhm.
like, okay, yep, like you said, I know that this is what they're going to want to do, so let's make that. How'd you come to that? And then how did your kids react to, or how did you have to manage your kids? I guess that's the
Mhm.
best way to
No,
say
I
that.
know what you're asking. Yeah. Well, first of all, I know myself and my tendencies really well. And I'm obsessive when it comes to putting together routines. And I had so many contingencies. If this one's here, then this. And if that one's not here, then this. And I had all these backup plans. I was driving myself nuts. And I thought, I can't do this anymore because it did keep changing. Even with the known issues, there were all the unknowns that were popping up. I have kids who are involved in a lot of different things academically and people missing all over the place for very legitimate reasons, things I was not going to fault them for. But nonetheless, it's a problem when you can't get everyone together at one time. And so initially, I said in the beginning, initially, I was like, we're not doing this. I can't, this is going to drive me crazy. I don't want to put a poor routine on the map, blah, blah. And I said that to them when we came back from winter break. I said, I don't see a way around this. This is the limited time we have. We got people missing at every practice. Even if we were just going to do all skills we already have, it would still be a stretch. And they all agreed, but I saw the faces too. And I went
Yeah.
home that night and I was like, okay, Susan, you just wrote a book on this. Like, you know, it can't always be perfect. So I'm like, they need this experience. I have seniors, this is their last chance,
Yeah.
and I was like, that wouldn't be fair. I want to give them that opportunity. So I came back the next practice and I said, and I thought about it. I was like, this is what it's going to take. And again, as explicit as I can, we have this time, this time, this time. These people are missing here. You cannot miss for any other reason. Like, are you in or are you out? We're in.
Yes.
So, um, and we had a practice last night and four people were missing. Two had class because I have to take whatever time they give me. I can't go, oh, I got athletes missing. Can we have a different slot? No, there is no other slot. So
Yeah.
two had class and two were at Yale at a conference. I wasn't going to make them miss that. They wouldn't have anyway. So,
Right.
so we made it work. We worked but this is the planning part of being a coach, especially a cheer coach.
Yeah.
You got to be on top of it. Like I knew exactly what could get done and what wasn't worth our time. And so we did all the pieces I could, and we had a really effective, like efficient practice. And now everyone except for one will be back on Sunday, and we're going to fill in the pieces and do a bunch of full outs, and that's it. And it is what it is at that point. We're going to do it for halftime at a game, and then we're going to perform it the next day. And I feel good about it. As long as it's safe, I'm okay. Like I won't put something that's rushed if it's unsafe. But we just drew from the skills we already had. But like I said, we added a new person last week. She's in it.
That's awesome. Yeah.
So,
Yep.
she's learning from ground up.
Yep.
There's a couple people that had to move positions and like they've sort of done this stuff, but not really, that's just what it is. And anybody who's coached cheer knows that. You're always in the last minute pulling in an alternate or you're switching something over. The name of the game.
Yep.
And I feel like that's a good life lesson. I mean, I work with this for myself, but I also think it's a life lesson for them. There is a level of commitment that needs to be there or it just doesn't work. But there also needs to be some flexibility because, you know, cheer is not the be all end all.
Yeah.
We are a club sport at a rigorous school where there's a lot of demands on their time outside of cheer. And I know that I'm a professor there. So I'm always trying to strike that balance of keeping the culture of commitment. Like you don't get to just bail for no reason,
Right.
but there are good reasons. And so they're learning how to communicate ahead of time to give us lots of time to figure it out. And, no more last minute coach. I'm not going to be there. I forgot about this thing.
Yeah.
That one drives me crazy.
Right.
Um, it happens still because they're,
Yeah. Yeah.
18, 19-year-olds, but they're better at it. They're so much better at it. And, again, those are the life skills that transfer out too.
Right. I think that's
So
huge.
that's how we did it. I'll let you know how it
you
goes.
you're teaching them accountability and
Hmm.
adaptability, which is
Hmm.
really important for their mental health, for their physical health, for their life that
Hmm.
happens, and I think that's a big gift. And okay, kudos. I'm excited for you guys and your team. Like, I think that's going to be really, it's awesome. And like, we all think when we compete, like, we're gonna go out there and like hit. And sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. And it's
Yeah.
okay because you
Yeah.
try, and if you can give yourself the grace, like that's the lesson. And as a coach or a parent, you're berating your kid because they didn't hit. Where does that, what does that carry over to? And I think like that's a big takeaway. Like you have an opportunity every moment to take a breath and like, okay, I'm frustrated too. And I've done like, I've gone and yelled at my kids, uh, you know, this didn't hit. Why didn't this hit? And what's the problem here? And then take a minute and like, oh, I gotta chill. You gotta chill.
Right.
React. And I think that's my big takeaway from this is like, that's a huge piece that is important,
Yeah,
and life lessons outside of cheer, so.
for sure. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. So besides the competition, what do you have going on? Your book's coming out soon, and this will,
I have a bunch more podcasts,
yeah,
some workshops, some speaking engagements around this kind of stuff. And I'm just going to see where it goes. I, I didn't really promote my first book much. I'm curious to see where the interest is going to lie with this. I'll do some promotion around it too.
yeah,
But yeah, I'm just teaching, coaching, and then I am more than happy if there's people who want to get into the specifics of what's in the book and how it's unique to their team. That's what I love to do. I mean, I love to speak to large audiences, but I really like to get into it in a more of a consulting role.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, I'm happy if there are people out there hearing this that are like, I can come to you if you're, easy to get to or do something virtually. But yeah, there's no definitive plans at this point other than that.
That's
I have a strong team coming back next year. I'm really excited. I am losing 5 seniors, and I'm sad to see them go. I have a really strong junior and sophomore class right now returning. And there's people are reaching out to me right now to join. So it'll be fun
that,
to be able to focus more on coaching because I was writing this at the same time this
yeah,
year. It will be great to have our own dedicated practice space back in the fall because we will.
yeah.
They built a beautiful new wellness center that will be done in May. Um, so I'm very excited for next
Yeah.
year and see what's coming.
Oh, that's awesome.
Mhm.
Is this your, how long
This
have
is
you been?
my third year. This is my
Yes.
third year. And it's
Yeah.
the third year of the program, really. I mean, they were in existence 1 year before me, but they were a club, not a
Yeah.
club sport, and they didn't have a coach. So yeah, it really has grown tremendously. I'm really proud of them. They've
Yeah.
just, yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, congratulations. That's it. Like,
Thank you.
it's a team. You guys have to work together on that. So that's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
Where can people reach you if they want to connect and ask you about consulting and any of this
I
stuff?
should have figured that out ahead of time, right? Um, well, I do have a Facebook business page, but so you could find me on Facebook. It's Susan Averna, PhD. Um, but honestly, the best way would be to email me
Yeah,
directly, and it's my full name, Susan Averna, SusanAverna at Comcast.net. Um, and we can take it from there. Yeah.
perfect. Cool.
Yeah. Thank you,
I'm so
Laura.
glad we got to talk again. And, I look forward to hearing how it goes. And we'll connect and maybe we'll talk after.
Oh yeah,
But,
we're gonna. I have lots of ideas too.
yeah,
Some potential collaborations again, maybe, and I think there's a couple comps coming up in Mass, right? There's the there's one on the 30th, I believe. And there's showcases, so
yeah,
I bet I'm
yeah,
gonna see.
yeah, yeah. And then, I know like all the local colleges like Assumption and
They're doing a showcase on the 30th.
showcase. Yeah. And Worcester State, I'm not sure if they did a showcase. They host, states and, all that's coming up in the next couple of weeks. So
Yeah, so we'll talk. Maybe we can meet
yeah,
up in person. That'd be fun.
that would be fun. Very cool.
All right,
Thanks
cool.
for being here. Thanks for listening, everyone. Hope you enjoy this. Please, if you found value, or if you know somebody that might benefit from listening and learning about the material Susan shared and her upcoming book, please share it with them. Subscribe to this so that we can get this out and make more people aware of all the awesome things that cheer athletes are
Yay.
doing these days. Don't forget, when in doubt, breathe it out. Take life one step at a time. You can do anything you put your mind to. And as my friend Drew Kelleher said, you're responsible for your own vibes. So go get the day.